In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 171 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is perseverance. Our quote of the day comes to us from Julie Andrews. Perseverance is failing 19 times and succeeding the 20th. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. It is my pleasure to bring you today's episode. Our guest shares some tremendous insight on our show from both his corporate background and now as he has just launched his own successful business. James Jacobi definitely brings it, and I love his no-quit attitude. I hope you enjoy today's episode. James, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks, Chris, for having me.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
I'm ready to bring it. Let's roll.
So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you have either a personal no-quit story or perhaps a really challenging time that tested you in life and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
You know, as I thought about the show today, there's a lot of moments in my life that I've had as a no-quit moment. And I'll definitely share one. But I thought it would also be important to share what it means to not quit and what it does for you. Because every time I've seen myself not quit in any part of my life, the other side has always been better. I've always grown the most when I pushed myself through the hardest part of the hardest challenge, no matter how hard it was. Those are the moments that I've grown the most as a person and as a professional. And that's one common thing I noticed when I was reflecting on for today's talk that was a common theme.
If you wouldn't mind, I love that you touch on that, and I think it's through our adversity, and I think we touch and interview quite a few people in the sports world, but I think it's during those tough times and during those challenges, and a lot of times during those losses where people learn the most. And I was curious if you could touch on a little bit with your story also.
Sure. So, I want to share, two short ones if that's okay with you, Chris.
Yes, sir.
So with my background, and this kind of goes into something else, but I am a founder of a nonprofit called Magic Moment Fund, and I'm also a founder of a business that I started about 8 weeks ago after I did a long corporate career. And the backstory to where I come from to get to who I am today is that I've faced a tremendous amount of normal adversity going through your career and growing to be very good at what you do. But even beyond that, things that have happened to me that really could have changed my life trajectory if I didn't let it, if I fought and pushed through it. And so what I wanted to share, and it's a little personal, but it's important because I want to share with people my why, and I believe in authenticity and transparency because that's the greatest way we can connect with each other and understand each other, right?
No, I appreciate it. I couldn't agree more, and I think being transparent, being vulnerable is where really some of the best relationships and companies, businesses, and even marriages come about. So I'd love to hear your personal story.
Totally. So my big why is I grew up with a lot of amazing foundation. I had a great family, a great father figure, a great set of parents that taught me the right morals and values. And so I started out life, on the up and up and in a more advantageous position to be successful. Had a lot of support. I also had a grandfather who was extremely successful. He was a famous dentist in the 60s, and he literally disrupted the dental industry because he wrote 2 books and taught dentists how to actually run their practice as a business. And that was an uncommon thought back then. And so he literally traveled the world. And if you knew any dentist back in the 70s and 80s, they all knew who my grandfather was. And so there's this gene in me of doing big things and helping a lot of people with a message that serves people well. And in my dad's case, he was with the company for 35 years and started from the ground up, from a paper route manager, worked all the way up to a CEO. And he was the CEO of his newspaper in numerous markets in my childhood. And so I got to learn a lot about loyalty, persistence, patience to see success. It doesn't happen overnight, but it takes obviously a lot of hard work and grit as well. And unfortunately, those are really great stories, but they also have some downsides to them as well. My grandfather was lost his life in a plane crash in 1999. I lost both my grandparents when they passed away from a plane crash, and I had a cousin who I grew up with that went to Iraq in the war in 2004 as a Marine and never came home. And that was during my senior year of high school and going into early college years, and it really threw me off course. It really challenged me to be like, wow, I have some really close people in my life that I, out of the blue, lost. And that was the first time I experienced that. And it really made me wonder who I was or what I was supposed to do. And it honestly set me back a couple of years. I took a pause on kind of the natural progression of you go to school, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, and you just go through that normal cycle that we all know. And I couldn't move forward at the moment. And so I had to really dig deep and figure out myself, which took a while to then begin and start again and to move forward. And, I could have quit school. I almost did. I almost quit school. And I decided that would have been selfish and it would have not served me or people that I eventually could have served. And I put myself through school on my own and finished and got a great job. That leads me to my second no quit story, which is I started with a company right out of college. I was 26, and I took the road less traveled. I'm a Midwest guy originally, and I moved out to the New Jersey, New York area to start this business from scratch for their new office. And this was right when the crash happened in 2009. It couldn't have been a worser time to start a business. But we found a way to get through it. And one of the greatest things I loved about this experience is that I didn't know anything better. I just knew I was out, Midwest guy getting to work near New York City, which is always a dream. You see New York City on TV growing up in the Midwest. It's like a really big deal. And so I was just so excited to be on the East Coast. And we grew the business phenomenally. I got promoted multiple times over the next few years. And until I couldn't do my job anymore. And that's what, I don't know if you've ever heard of what the Peter Principle is. But the Peter Principle is a theory that's proven that as people rise up in an organization, they rise up and get promoted until they fail because of incompetence or lack of the ability to do the job well. And that's where I hit a wall, is when I became a leader in sales. I learned that was a very different job than being a top producer, which I was. I was at the bottom of my company in production, and in over a few years, I mastered that and became number one in the company. And so you figure, great, I got all this success, I can take the next step and keep moving up. And it's just not the case, because when you grow up in a company and you move up into new roles, you're going to face adversity and things that really challenge you. And this was a job that I thought I'd do well, and I really, really struggled at it for a long time. I actually did it for about 4 years before I could have quit, should have quit, but I took a different road, and I actually said, you know what, I'm not going to quit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot. I'm going to pivot because I need to learn something, and I need to get better in order for me to really make this role work for me. And so what I did is I actually fired myself. I talked to my upper management team, and I fired myself from that job because I knew that I was missing things that I needed to know and skills I needed to have to get the success I really wanted from my team and for myself and for the company. So that's the moment where I restarted myself. I went into a new market, and I got a lot of training. I went to conferences, and I got mentors and coaches, and really for the first time invested in myself. And that is something that I want to share on this podcast that is so huge for growth and success. And through getting through the no quit moments, is there's times where you can push through it yourself with what you have, but there's also times where you have to reach up to people that are better than you at what you do, that can help you and learn and teach you things that you need to learn to grow. And so that is what I started to do. And it was an eye-opening experience of realizing what happens when you actually put money into you instead of buying, clothes or vacations or, anything, frivolous that's fun, but actually spending that money, your hard-earned dollars back into you and reinvesting in you as an asset, and watching that appreciate in value, because you're getting and learning things that will help you become more successful, create more wealth, make more sales, be a better leader, etc. And where the end result of all that was, in the next 2 years, I built this team from scratch, had no turnover in 2 years, which was unheard of in the industry I was in. That's not normal. It doesn't happen. And we were the fastest growing team in the company. It was about 300 producers. We grew 4 times faster than any other team out there, and grew a book of business from nothing to about $7 million in run rate revenue. So, but that's only because I took the no quit attitude, that I'm not giving up. I'm just pivoting because I need to equip myself with things that will make me better in order for me to move forward. And so there's a lot of people that I watched over my career, because I did this for 10 years, that quit. They quit after the first 6 months, the first year, the first 2 years. That's usually the highest window where people quit sales jobs, because they don't see success. But I stuck through it, and I pushed through it, and I never gave up. And I ended that 10-year run at the best possible place I could have ended up.
I appreciate you sharing that story, and I love that backstory about your grandfather and your father. And I think it's so interesting because I haven't heard of it in regards to how you mentioned is not giving up but actually pivoting. There's a gentleman by the name of Michael J. Mayer, who's an incredibly successful author, also in the real estate world, and he was talking to me early on in our podcast, and he said something very similar. He said, I realized, he said, I could give up and quit and throw in the towel. He said, but instead what I did is I stopped. He said, I didn't give up, I didn't quit. He said, but I readdressed where I was, I reassessed where I was going, and then I went at it with a different angle, and I went at it with a different approach. And I think that's spot on with what you said as far as pivoting. So wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind quickly just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and exactly what you're doing now with your new business.
Yeah, thanks so much. So what I'm doing now is I transitioned from corporate. I was in corporate sales, servicing large enterprise business with healthcare hospitals and insurance companies. I transitioned from that. I now started my own company, which does I help sales managers or sales directors become successful in their role. So you can kind of see the linkage to the story now. I help them achieve success like I did. And I also help companies acquire the best talent through my recruiting background. So I have a two-pronged approach to my business. And I have a best-selling book that's coming out in 3 weeks on December 13th.
That's awesome, and congratulations. Would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about that book or where they can find it?
Absolutely. So the book is called Radical Integrity, 7 Breakthrough Strategies for Transforming Your Business, Sales, and Life. And you can look it up on Amazon or by the title, or you can search by my name. And if you would like, for the listeners that are on here today, you can actually get a free copy if you go to James Jacobi, so JamesJacobi.com /free book, and you can reserve a free ebook copy that I will get out to you when it launches on the 13th.
That's awesome, and I appreciate that. We love free gifts for our listeners. So, wanted to ask you, James, if you had to and only could define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
It's a great question. I'd have to say perseverance. There's a lot of words that I could probably use, but that's the one that I feel like describes a lot of my backstory.
No, I'm a
perseverant person.
No, I definitely agree. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is in your corporate career, as well as having a successful father and grandfather, wanted to ask you if you remember or have your favorite advice you've ever received.
Favorite advice I've ever received, and it's funny because you hear these things all the time, right? But it means something different as you either age or you're in different circles of influence. But I would say 2 things. It's always have a positive attitude, have a positive mindset about who you are, about what you're doing, and surround yourself with 5 people that you want to be associated with. Because if I look at the 5 people you spend the most time with, I can tell about where you are at with your life, with your wealth, with your skill set, with your impact. So those 2 things I think are really important for anybody if they want to continue to succeed in life.
No, I love that. And that's actually one of my favorite quotes by Jim Rohn is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with. And I just touched on that on a couple different podcasts. So I think that's great advice. So one of the things we look to do is always add value to our listeners. And one of the things we've been often talking about in most of 2018 is the importance of a morning or a daily ritual. So I was curious if you have either a morning or a daily ritual that you swear by.
Yes, I do. And this is credit to a huge mentor of mine, Danelle Delgado, who I believe you've had on your show before.
Yep, she's awesome.
She's great. I've done a lot of work with her, and she's amazing. But one of the things that she taught me about 18 months ago was the power of gratitude. And I didn't really know what that meant until I started doing it. But it's really simple, and you won't really understand the impacts of it till you start doing it consistently, and then no one will have to tell you. You'll just start to notice what it does. But if you just write down 10 things you're grateful for on a piece of paper, on a journal, in your iPhone, notepad, just 10 things you're grateful for every day, it really centers you on what's most important in life and what matters most and where you should spend most of your time, and really keeps you centered on where you are and where you need to go.
No, I'm so glad you touched on that, and Danelle was awesome on my show, and that's actually something that she touched on. So I wanted to ask you a question, a follow-up to that is, I often talk about the power of gratitude I have a 2-pager that I use with my clients and with my friends, and it's got different things that you're grateful for both in the morning and the evening. And somebody asked me something I wanted to ask you is, do you have to use the same, or should you use different things that you're grateful for each day? Wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I do both. I tend to write things that are very similar every day, because every day I also have the belief that every day isn't, granted to you. You don't know what happens tomorrow. So I am grateful for, my family every day. And that may be repetitive, but it's also something that you can re-enjoy and be grateful for every day. So I do write repetitive things a lot of times, but there's also special moments that happen every day where there's a person that comes in your life and does something great with you or that impacted you. And I always want to write those people down, because it helps me remember and look for the special moments in each day where I can help someone or someone help me in a meaningful way. And I need to recognize and appreciate that.
No, I think that's awesome that you touched on that. And it's something that I teach and preach with myself. And I have not been doing it for a long, long time myself, but it's something that definitely has a positive impact. So I want to change lanes here for a minute. One of the words we often talk about, not only on our show, but also in our speaking and our coaching, is the word accountability. And I just wanted to ask you, what does the word accountability mean to you?
Accountability means, I actually link accountability with integrity, because it's doing what you say you're going to do. And you got to come through. You got to come through for yourself, and you got to come through for the people that are tied to whatever that outcome is. So I think those two words actually go very closely together.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I love the fact that you said, and you got to come through, because at the end of the day, whether you're being accountable to yourself, to your team, to your family, to a spouse, you need to actually go ahead and do it. So I love that. Wanted to ask you, if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, and assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what would that 20-year-old version like to have heard?
Oh, a lot of things. But it's interesting. Yeah, I think about this sometimes. Where would I change anything if I could go back? And that's a tricky question, right? Because you kind of are shaped because of those choices. So in some ways, you may not be the person you are today because you had to go through those choices. But could you have gone through it faster? Maybe, probably. And I think that's where a lot of mentors or successful people, that's why they want to give back so much, is they want to share what they learned, so that hopefully you don't have to take as long to learn those lessons as they did. And you can enjoy more success. But I would tell my 20-year-old self that you are enough, and you are special. You do not, no matter what happens to you, no matter what job you take or where you go in your life, no matter what you're trying to do to grow or reach your goal, whatever that is, I would tell myself, do not compare yourself to anyone else, because it doesn't matter. All that matters is you focusing on being your best self. And because you are your best self, you will actually be the most impactful to everyone else around you that you want to help.
No, I love that advice. And I think that's where, in today's day and age with social media and things like that, when you compare yourself to others, unfortunately, you're comparing yourself to others, and it's not always what they're doing or who they really are. A lot of times it's flash in the past, where something's going on right now. So I love that. And then wanted to ask you an interesting question. If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Ooh. I would have dinner. Who would I have dinner with? I had this question asked to me about a month ago. And I came up with a couple people. I'd want to have dinner with my grandfather when he was younger, when he was like in his 30s or 20s, and learning what life was like for him and the decisions he was making. I would even say that about my dad, and I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but I think as we age as people and you go through stages of life, you start to value things differently. I have 3 kids, small kids, and my perspective and values have shifted a lot since I was in my 20s. And there's things that I've realized now that I would really like to learn or know about, maybe how my parents or their parents raised us, or what was life like for them growing up while we were young. We didn't know what was going on, but what were they dealing with, and what did they learn, and how did they make those tough choices? I think there's a lot of interesting backstory that is directly tied to your life. It's just through a different movie. It's a different lens, and I think that'd be a really fascinating conversation.
No, your grandfather sounds like quite an interesting guy, and obviously he was very successful within his field. So I think it would be an awesome dinner. I wanted to ask you a question that we haven't been asking a lot recently, but when people face adversity and find themselves with their backs against the wall, I wanted to ask you, why do you think that some people actually give up and throw in the towel while others refuse to quit? Do you think it's something inside them, or what do you think?
I think it's largely due to fear and letting the drama of that consume you to the point where it paralyzes you, because that in that moment, that's a fight or flight moment, right? Like, you either fight and you push through it, or you flight. And it's so easy to say just push through it, but we've all been there where our backs are against the wall and you got to make tough choices, and it really tests the measure of where you're at with your own character. But I think that is where, again, going back to gratitude and self-worth and all that, comes into a huge factor, where you got to have that affirmation that you tell yourself, you can do this. You can do this. This is how you're going to do it. And just think through the end result and tell yourself you can get to that finish line, and just let your mind and your genius go to work. And I think that's where a lot of people flight, is they don't give themselves that chance because of the fear. But you just got to subside that. One thing I talk about, and that I've heard others talk about, is you can't ignore fear, or you can't try to suppress it, because actually when you suppress fear, it just gets louder. So it's, instead of trying to quiet it down and not be uncomfortable in those situations, just like acknowledge it and dance with it, but don't let it consume you. Just let it know that it's there, but it doesn't have power over you. And you just look at the situation, look at the result you need to get, and just go do it. Taking action really alleviates a lot of the pressure that is built up in your own head.
I love that. I love that you just shared on that, because that's something that we talk about almost every week on our show, is the importance of taking action. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people miss the boat with, is the best information, the best trainers. You've used the word mentor, the best mentors and people in your corner and on your bus is so important. But at the end of the day, you need to go ahead and take action. And I think a lot of times people miss those two when they have the best coaches or trainers and they take little to no action. Or the flip side is they have maybe not a lot of money and opportunity for that, but they take a huge amount of action. And ultimately, those are the people that a lot of times are more successful, because it is the action at the end of the day that dictates a lot of the success.
It's totally the action. And I talk about that in my book, and I learned that from mentors like Danelle. But I actually made a post about this yesterday on my Instagram. But we tend to, when we goal set, Chris, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think we fall into a trap when we try to goal set, because a lot of our goal setting mentality is either from our own past experiences and failures, or it's also tied to what we've seen around our common norm of people that are in our circle. And so it really limits the range of what you think is possible, and you put your goals within that range. But if you actually put that to the shelf and just say, whatever this goal is, I'm going to do it in a 10th of the time, or I'm going to 10x the result. This is kind of going on Grant Cardone now, but when you start to change your thinking to that and actually take action to go do that, I have personally found time and time again that you can achieve much bigger results in a much less amount of time and it just took that limiting framework off.
You touched on Grant Cardone, so I need to ask you if there's anything that you're reading or you're reading something currently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
I'm reading a couple books right now. I just started one that that was recommended to me by some big mentors of mine called Mastery, and it's a big book, but I heard it's one of the best books out there for learning how to master and discipline yourself with really strong habits and who you are to the core and how you can be different. The other book that I'm reading, and I credit this in my book, is Disrupt You by Jay Samit. Genius person, genius human being. Highly recommend that book. It's an incredible read for anybody who wants to grow a profitable and scalable business that matters, because it talks about learning how to solve problems that are simple to solve, but a lot of people don't take the time to do that. And it's a phenomenal read about that.
No, that's awesome. And then last question before we let you go, I wanted to ask you if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Keep coming in on Chris's podcast, because he's bringing in some great people, and there's a lot of great anecdotes and advice. But I would just say, whatever your dream is, my biggest piece of advice to people is whatever's in your heart, that is a special thought, a special desire that is likely not in other people. It's special and unique to you, and you need to go pursue that. You need to act on it because you are meant to have that. And don't wait for tomorrow, because tomorrow is not granted to us. You never know when the final day is. And I've learned that the hard way through some trauma in my life, but I want to I always tell people that you just go after your dreams. And I know it's kind of a pie in the sky, and we hear that all the time, but it's serious. Like, you have one life, like, don't quit, take action, go do what you want to do, and go be a positive influence to the people around you.
No, I love that, and I love that last piece is be a positive influence to those people around you. So, last question for you is wanted to ask you. You mentioned your book, and what's the best way for our listeners to connect or follow you?
You can follow me on Instagram at Real James Jacobi, or you can go to. I'm on there a lot. I'm on there. I post every day, and I'm also on Facebook. You can go to James.Jacobi on Facebook. You can find me there too.
Awesome. Listen, James, I truly appreciate the time you shared with us, but also some of the wonderful insight. And I'll definitely have to thank Danelle for the plugs we gave her, and she definitely needs to listen to this episode. But hopefully we can talk again soon.
Thanks so much, Chris, for having me.
Thank you for listening to episode number 171. I hope you enjoyed what James had to share with us today. I loved how he discussed a tough time in his personal career. He mentioned how he didn't actually quit, but instead he pivoted and he spent both his time as well as his money in and on himself. He invested in himself as an asset. Early on in the episode, James shared that how every time that he has not quit, he has actually grown the most, both personally and professionally. With his morning routine, James shared how every day he writes down 10 things he is grateful for. I personally think that this is something that has great power, not only to and with our mindset, but also on how we approach each and every day. In his parting words, James spoke about whatever your dream is or what is in your heart is unique to you and not to wait until tomorrow. So I challenge you today, as we are heading towards the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019, to go after it. And by it, I mean whatever it is you are truly meant to do or be. Go after it and take action. Don't think, hope, wish, or just dream. Instead, do. Take action and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.